Whenever we arrive at a new hotel, our check-in request causes raised eyebrows. 4 rooms, nowhere near each other. Not next to each other, not opposite each other, not above and not below. This may seem like a really strange request from 4 people who are very comfortable in each other's company. We perform over 80 concerts a year worldwide, and we spend more time together than we do with our families. But imagine the scene. I'm settling into my room, looking forward to an afternoon siesta, and from next to my left ear, I hear András, our cellist. And then from the other side, next to my right ear, Károly, our second violinist. And from above my head, through the ceiling, Jerry, our violist. My afternoon siesta is ruined. If they're all practicing, then so should I. I'm Ed, the first violinist of the Takács Quartet, and for me, and I think for all of us, one of the really fun things about playing string quartets is how exactly do we find this balance between the individual space that we need, individual ideas, in what essentially is a very intense group activity. We prepare in 2 different ways for a concert. We have our individual practice that goes on in hopefully well-separated hotel rooms, and then we come together to rehearse. And during those rehearsals, we have to make many adjustments. A musical phrase that might seem to me sounds great in my hotel room needs to be redesigned within the group. And these readjustments take a number of different forms. We have to be able to play faster, slower, louder, quieter, and we have to be able to change the type of sound we make. We might play a brighter sound to show a direct individual line. We might play a more mellow sound to blend with the group. And so these are the type of things that we're working on, above all, to try and communicate a very strong musical character in whatever piece we're playing. This evening, we're going to play the second movement from one of 3 string quartets composed by Beethoven in 1805 and 1806 in Vienna. And at the top of this piece, he gave us a really clear character instruction. Vivace e sempre scherzando, which means lively and always jokingly. And the nature of the humor is in the way that we interact with each other. So we're going to play the beginning of this piece for you, which may sound somewhat familiar at this point. And listen particularly to Jerry's entrance, which, although it imitates András, she heads off in a completely different direction, in a different key. So right early on, when we're trying to get this thing going, she's establishing her independence. Four individual entrances. We could actually have, if we had our hotels next to each other, hotel rooms, we could have actually managed that beginning without ever leaving our rooms. But you couldn't say that for the rest of the movement. The interactions become much more complex. And we're going to play now a section from far on into the movement. It's the same music, but reinvented. So you'll hear András's rhythm, the answer, and also a new melody. And somehow the 4 individual voices have become blended. So much of the fun that we have with this music is in the different roles that we play. Sometimes playing alone, sometimes arguing with one of the others, sometimes cooperating, sometimes playing as a whole group. But the first players and audiences who had to listen and play this music did not like it. One arrogant violinist, if you can imagine such a phenomenon, actually said to Beethoven, "This is not music." And a cellist, after playing the very opening that you've heard András play, had a very extreme reaction. Typical cellist. But how to explain such an extreme reaction? Perhaps he was insulted by the fact that it was just one note. It wasn't really a proper tune. But the problems went deeper than this. The audiences and players felt that they were being taken on a journey whose destination was unknown. Think back to Jerry's first entrance, where she's already pushing us off to a different key. We're going to play a section from the middle of the movement, a little bit under tempo, which I think would have confused the first audiences and listeners. You can probably hear that we change musical key pretty much every bar, every measure, and also that the melodic line is just shooting back and forth between us so quickly that it's quite hard to follow. Those loud chords at the end, they remind me a little bit of a situation that we may all have been in, where we're driving in the middle of nowhere with our navigation system on, and suddenly it announces very confidently, "You have arrived at your destination." And this is precisely how audiences felt, that they had not arrived at any destination that they recognized. And indeed, they probably would have liked to shout out to Beethoven, "Please proceed to the highlighted route." So what can we make of these shocked, negative reactions to music that within 3 or 4 years, a lot of people had changed their minds about? These became some of the most popular string quartets. And maybe what we can learn is that out of shock and disorientation and confusion, sometimes comes our most creative moments. The theme of this session is naturally wondering. And in order to wonder, sometimes we have to wander. With an English accent, that pretty much sounds exactly the same anyway. But you have to be willing to explore, not necessarily knowing what the destination is. Beethoven himself composed while walking in his natural environment, in the parks and surrounding countryside of Vienna. He carried a sketchbook with him to jot down notes, and he was often so completely absorbed in his work that he got completely lost. Maybe if he'd had a navigation system, he would never have written his best music. Who knows? So out of this atmosphere of wandering, exploration, he wrote some of his most inventive music, including this second movement of his string quartet, Opus 59, number 1, that we're now going to perform.
Thank